NFL legend and Hall of Famer Brett Favre sues NFL Hall of Famer Shannon Sharpe and another former NFL player, Pat McAfee, and he claims that they defamed him. Let's talk about it. So, NFL Hall of Famer Brett Favre filed a defamation lawsuit in Mississippi against NFL Hall of Famer Shannon Sharpe, former NFL player Pat McAfee, and state auditor Shad White. Now, this all stems from allegations made in 2022 that Brett Favre allegedly stole welfare funds for some pet projects. Here's the story as told by the media.
Accusations that retired NFL quarterback Brett Favre used welfare funds to help build a new volleyball stadium at his alma mater, the University of Southern Mississippi, where his daughter played the sport. A former director of Mississippi's welfare agency, John Davis, has now pleaded guilty to federal and state charges that he conspired to misspend tens of millions of those welfare funds meant for the poorest families in what is the poorest state in the U.S.
A new court filing making public more text messages allegedly showing NFL Hall of Famer Brett Favre pressing former Mississippi Governor Phil Bryant for money.
Our recruit. I said we don't have one, but we are hoping to break ground in less than 2 years. Now that will not happen without your help/commitment. Bryant responding, use of these funds is tightly controlled. Any improper use could result in violation of federal law. The president of Southern Miss, Rodney Bennett, texting Governor Bryant in part, I've asked Brett not to do the things he's doing, to seek funding from state agencies and the legislature for the volleyball facility. I will see for the umpteenth time if we can get him to stand down. The bottom line is he personally guaranteed the project, and on his word and handshake, we proceeded. It's time for him to pay up. It really is just that simple. Bryant responding, that was my thoughts. Maybe he wants the state to pay off his promises. Brett Favre is blowing me up over that proposal Nancy New submitted for the center at Southern Miss. Brett needs more to do in his life just now. Thumbs up emoji. Freeze responding to the governor, I'm not inclined to approve at this time. I don't think now is the time to give them $2 million. Bryant texting back, I think Brett was told it was going to get done by the previous director. One of the reasons that he is the former director.
And he personally was paid more than $1 million to give 3 motivational speeches that never happened. Favre says he never knew it was welfare money and paid it back after demands by state officials.
The filing goes on to claim that in more texts from 2019, Favre asked Bryant for assistance to secure more funding, texting, we obviously need your help big time, and time is working against us. Bryant responds, we are going to get there. This was a great meeting, but we have to follow the law. I am too old for federal prison. These new court documents filed by Bryant's attorneys allege Favre and former nonprofit director Nancy New, who has already pleaded guilty to fraud in the $77 million scheme, were requesting funds from the Mississippi Department of Human Services to build the facility. In a different text exchange, Favre asking New, if you were to pay me, is there any way the media can find out where it came from and how much?
So after all this information was leaked, Shannon Sharpe and other commentators went on and made comments about what they just heard. The lawsuit alleges that Shannon Sharpe made, quote, egregiously false statements on the show Skip and Shannon. Included in those false statements is one where Shannon said Favre stole money from people that really needed it. Here's exactly what Shannon Sharpe had to say after the facts were released.
Mississippi is the poorest state in our country.
It is.
Its citizens. So if they're the poorest state, Brett Favre is taken from the underserved. You made $100+ million in the NFL. And they talk about what he didn't know. This is what Brett Favre texted. If you were to pay me, is there any way the media can find out where it came from and how much? So if you gotta ask this question, is there any way the media can find out? You already know you're doing something wrong. The mere fact that you don't want anybody to know. So you know you're doing something wrong. And Skip, he wanted to seem so philanthropic. He wanted to change the perception of the narrative. He take money for some damn volleyball arena.
Well, his
daughter played. You see what Brett Favre did for his alma mater? Mm-hmm. No, he didn't get no money came out of his pocket. He stole money from people that really needed that money.
Yep.
Man, this is embarrassing. And he's not the only one. Ted DiBiase, a former wrestler, even Marcus Dupree, a great running back at the school that you loved growing up, Oklahoma. He got money. How can you got to be really low to take from the poorest of the poor? Brett, you ain't got enough money? Okay, Skip, You know you're not supposed to have this. But how am I going to give the damn speeches? They're paying you to give speeches, and you didn't even give the speeches. And now you won't even pay the money back.
Now, Shannon Sharpe isn't the only one being sued by Brett Favre. Former retired NFL player Pat McAfee is also being sued by Favre. And Favre is claiming that McAfee used, quote, outrageous falsehoods, that including calling Favre a thief who was, quote, stealing from poor people in Mississippi. Here's exactly what Pat McAfee said.
FBI is getting involved.
Oh, no. Well, Brett shouldn't have fucking stole from the people, Brett.
Yeah. Brett Favre is a goddamn criminal mastermind. I mean, I had no idea. I thought Brett was just some dumb hayseed. I love watching him play football. He's one of my favorite quarterbacks of all time. This guy's like Bernie Madoff, what he was doing down there.
Holy shit.
There's a lawsuit for $20 million plus against this group. So we're not just talking about small amounts of money here. We're talking about a scheme in which the person that was running the welfare fund in Mississippi had access to the fund and was divvying it apparently to friends and businesses. This is like classic why everybody trusts nobody anymore. This is people in positions to help people over blatantly and deliberately, allegedly, obviously, in this whole thing. And Brett is just one of like 38 names that is listed in this entire thing. And it is all bad, AJ. It is all bad. I mean, it is not good at all. Which everybody says Mississippi is like the poorest group. I was in Jackson, Mississippi, driving around there, probably seeing. There's no reason for the government to be taking $20 million out of that place. Yeah. You know what I mean? I mean, that is not at least $20 million. Who knows how much more? But this is like the problem with the world almost, isn't it? I mean, this is
really bad. Really bad, yeah. Like, yeah, it's, man, and there's a lot of people involved, right? You say 30-some people? Is that how many people in the lawsuit?
38.
I think it was 38 people listed in the lawsuit. This is all alleged, and obviously we don't know what's real, what isn't. We've seen text messages. There's more fraud. And the way the story lays out is like there was one person that was put in a position of power who probably flexed that position of power, by the way. Whenever they would talk amongst friends, remember this guy runs this, or I think it was a guy, and I think it was a lady who was the head of the nonprofit. This guy runs this fund for the government. He's a big deal. So whenever he speaks, think about how you guys should be doing it this way, you guys should be doing it this way, just how matter of fact that person lived. Just so automatic respect because of who this person is, the position they have. That's kind of how the life they treated. And while doing that, potentially, allegedly, and he pleaded guilty in 2020, so something was going on, taking money and just giving the worst type of human, just like doing this. But then once again in public, oh, yeah, you're welcome that I'm here. You know, like that type of stuff. And whenever you're treated in conversation, that's not good. It's terrible. And it's what's wrong with the world. And one of the greatest football players of all time is directly tied into it. And that is not good. Like, that's not a fun thing to happen, but it is happening, and we should talk about it.
So now let's talk about defamation. Now, there are two forms of defamation. There's defamation per quad and defamation per se. Per quad is the run-of-the-mill defamation. That's the one where somebody may say something defamatory about you, and you have to prove things like you are harmed by the defamation and that you've suffered some damages from the defamation. But Brett Favre is really alleging defamation per se. Now, defamation per se is something that most plaintiffs want because it's easier to prove. Here are the elements for defamation per se. You need a false statement about or concerning the plaintiff, published to a third party, and in this particular case, they're alleging that Brett Favre has committed some crimes, the crime of fraud or misappropriation of funds. And even with all that, you still have to prove the mental state, which here, because we're talking about defamation per se of a public figure, Brett Favre is obviously a public figure, we'd have to prove or have to show in our pleadings actual malice. So just to be clear, when I say actual malice in this context of defamation, I mean the mental state in which the defendant said the defamatory statements with knowledge it was false or with reckless disregard of whether it was false or not. Now, this is where, unfortunately, I think Brett Favre's lawsuit falls apart. Think about it. How can Brett Favre prove that both Pat McAfee and Shannon Sharpe knew these statements that they were saying were false and said them anyway, based on the evidence that you've been presented? That's going to be a very, very, very big hurdle for Brett Favre to overcome, because I don't see any reasonable person not being able to say they didn't know that these statements were false, especially based on what was being reported, based on the court filing. And Pat McAfee's saying allegedly all over the place.
Allegedly, obviously, in this whole thing. And while doing that, potentially, allegedly. So
I'm going to keep it real. I think Brett Favre has got a real major problem with actual malice. I think the actual malice piece may destroy his lawsuit, because it's not just proving these things are false. It's proving that they're false and both Pat McAfee and Shannon Sharpe knew they were false or had some evidence to show them it was false, and they said them anyway. I don't think Brett Favre has it. Now, I think you can make the case that Brett Favre has created or has filed what's known as a SLAPP suit. This is a strategic lawsuit against public participation. Now, this refers to lawsuits brought by individuals or entities to dissuade their critics from continuing to produce negative publicity. Does this sound familiar? By definition, SLAPP suits do not have any true legal claims against the critics. People bringing SLAPP suits because they can either temporarily prevent their critics from making public statements against them, or more commonly, to make their critics spend all their time and resources defending the SLAPP suit. Now, this seems exactly like what Brett Favre is doing. He's suing both Shannon Sharpe and Pat McAfee to stop them from talking about the lawsuit, stop them from talking about the crimes. He wants to stop them from talking about the welfare fund. And it may be working. For instance, Shannon Sharpe has stopped talking and is not saying anything about the incident until this legal issue is resolved. But Pat McAfee, he says no. He's going to talk, and he welcomes the lawsuit. Listen to what he says.
What?
Yeah, we made it, boys. Hey.
You arrived.
Take a bow.
So I would like to let the New York lawyers that wrote me 2 letters before this thing got announced. First letter was, we would like you to go back and erase every single video that has Brett Favre's name mentioned in it from your YouTube library, your Twitter library, and everything else. This is a warning shot, pretty much. So I looked at that. I said, that is hilarious. Of course we're not doing that. Put that down, move on with my life. I would like to let everybody know the quotes that were in that lawsuit were certainly accurate. But there's one word I believe that was said often on this particular program, if you were to watch it all, and that would be allegedly.
That's right.
Our job is to report the news. Allegedly, what was going on down in Mississippi with Brett Favre, the man who is suing me for money and for defamation, was being reported on this particular program because we owe the sports media world our coverage of it. We take our job seriously as journalists. Just a couple days ago, we introduced to the world darkness retreats for 4 days.
That's right.
There you go.
We've made poop jokes before.
What?
We've also potentially been a part of building an indoor facility, which is just like a $100,000 bubble for the Cincinnati Bengals team. We take a lot of pride in our work. We had to cover that situation, and we certainly said allegedly. And a lot of people are wondering how my lawyers are going to handle this. You know it. I ain't got them. So let's ride this. I'm excited to see how it goes. I'll see you in court, pal.
So now you have all of the facts. Who do you think is going to win? Do you think Brett Favre is going to recover against both Pat McAfee and Shannon Sharpe for the comments that they made, calling him a thief and stealing from poor people? Or do you think Brett Favre has just filed a classic SLAPP suit to try to stop them from talking about his alleged, and I want to make sure I'm clear, alleged criminal activity in the state of Mississippi? Let me know in the comments section. My name is Nate the Lawyer. Don't forget, like, share, subscribe, do all that great YouTube stuff, and I'm going to holla at you the next one. Peace.